Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday morning to you and happy February 2025. Here we are, February the 7th. I believe that's the proper date. And already 1 month's gone. Wow, it's hard to believe. So, anyway, thank you so very, very much for joining me for Morning Musings here on Now TV. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. And again, I really, really appreciate you being with me. And I'll be announcing another fantastic book deal for the month of February later this week. And I'll be announcing it on YouTube and Facebook as well as here on Now TV. So be watching for that. Thank you for all of those of you who took advantage of our special offer in January. That was a fantastic offer. I'm talking a really, really good offer. And so thank you for all of those of you who took advantage of that. And we continued to grow. Our channel continues to grow. Last time I looked, we were like at 8,800 subscribers. Please do me a favor, all right? Hit the subscribe, hit the like, hit the share, and help our channel to grow. The more people that can tune into this program and understand, number one, the challenge of Christ and what it genuinely is and the significance of that challenge. Remember, Jesus said to an unbelieving audience, to a hostile audience, if I do not do the works that my Father has given me, do not believe me. Okay? You know, in Oklahoma, USA, we've got this saying, put up or shut up. And that's exactly what Jesus was saying. Jesus was saying, I'm going to make predictions. If I don't fulfill those predictions, do not believe me. Don't believe that I am the Son of God. Don't believe that the Father sent me. But he said, if I do the works which the Father has given me, even though you don't believe me, believe the works which I do. So Jesus issued this challenge. And I have found it lamentably true over the years that far too many Christians are not aware of this challenge. Are you aware of it? And when I have asked people, and I've shared with them the challenge of Christ from John chapter 10, 37 and following, and they go, well, okay, but. And I go, but what? That's the challenge. And I ask people, if Jesus was not raised from the dead, like he said he would be, Matthew 17, Matthew 20, Matthew 21, if Jesus was not raised from the dead, how does that fit the challenge of Christ? Well, Paul answers that question in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 when he says, if Christ is not risen from the dead, then our faith is in vain. You are still in your sins. We are found to be false witnesses. Folks, that's how serious the challenge of Christ is. But look, that's not the only prediction that Jesus gave. Jesus said, the Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels and shall reward every man according to his works. And verily I say unto you, there are some standing here, that was 2,000 years ago, folks, which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. So the great question is, in light of Jesus's challenge, did Jesus come in the glory of the Father with his angels in judgment before all that generation passed? And it's absolutely stunning to me. I've been in a host of formal public debates, in countless private discussions. And I ask people, okay, did Jesus come in judgment with the angels in the first century in that lifetime of that audience? And they tell, well, no. Then Jesus failed his own challenge. And one of the responses is, well, who saw him come? I didn't see him come. Did you see him come? And John said in Revelation chapter 1, verse 7, by the way, a text we're going to get to, okay? Behold, he comes with the clouds, and every eye shall see him. Now I'm going to stop quoting right there. But if we just stopped right there, where Jesus said, behold, he comes with a cloud, and every eye shall see him. Oh my goodness, we've got a problem here. Because, number one, people take that to speak of the globe, and every person on the globe did not see Jesus come in the first century. So there you have it. Jesus failed his own challenge according to the skeptics. According to the skeptics who do not understand what I have been sharing with you, what countless others are coming to understand, and that is Christ never, listen to me and catch the power of this, Jesus never predicted that he was going to come out of heaven as a 5'5" Jewish man in a physical body at the end of time. He never predicted that. Jesus said, the kingdom does not come with observation. Luke chapter 17, 20 and 21. But wait, the kingdom comes at the time of Christ's coming, his parousia, his erchomai, Greek word. So since the kingdom would not come with observation, and since the kingdom would come at the time of Christ's appearing, 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1 and 2, where Paul wrote to Timothy, and he said, I charge you therefore before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who is about to judge the living and the dead. That's the judgment, and that's the resurrection. And his appearing, that's the Greek word epiphany, his shining forth, and kingdom. So in two verses, we have the prediction of the judgment, the resurrection, the coming of the Lord, and the kingdom. All of this is precisely synchronous with each other. You cannot separate the epiphany of the Lord from the coming of the kingdom. And the epiphany is nothing but the parousia. It's nothing but his coming. And Jesus said, Paul said, it was about to happen when he wrote to Timothy in the 60s. Folks, this challenge of Christ is very, very serious. So I've been sharing with you what I just did. The kingdom does not come with observation, but the kingdom comes at the time of the parousia and the epiphany. Therefore, the coming of Christ would not come with observation. And somebody says, well, wait a minute, Preston, it says epiphany. That's the shining forth. That's exactly right. So how do we explain that? Is this a conundrum? Well, when we talk about Revelation 1:7, we'll talk about it in more linguistic detail, but I want you to realize at this point that even in the Grecian world, in the Grecian pantheon, even in the Roman pantheon, and most assuredly in Jewish thought, guess what? Anytime God acted in history by using in his sovereignty one nation to judge another nation, he shined forth. He manifested his glory. He manifested his sovereignty. And anytime Yahweh acted in his sovereignty to use one nation to judge another one, he was said to come. to come on the clouds, to come in flaming fire, to come with a shout, to come with his angels. Folks, this is common Hebraic, apocalyptic. Now, there's a big word for you. But apocalyptic means that in using his sovereignty to use one nation to judge another, Jesus was unveiled. He was revealed. That's what the word apocalypsis means. It's the unveiling. It's pulling back the veil to reveal what is there. And thus, in the Old Testament, 82 times, and in the book of Ezekiel especially, 69 times, when the Lord said he was going to act in judgment by using one nation to judge another one, he said, I'm going to do this that they may know that I am the Lord. Now, what they would see visibly was this war and this destruction of this ungodly nation by this other nation as predicted by the prophets. But when they would view that, because they knew that it had been predicted by Yahweh's prophets, Yahweh said, then shall they know that I am the Lord. Okay, I've got to hurry here because last week I introduced to you the concept of the unseen resurrection. I've been talking about the unseen parousia, and we're going to get back to that. But there is no dichotomy, as I've already pointed out, from 2 Timothy chapter 4, the coming of the Lord, the judgment, the resurrection, the kingdom are all synchronous events. So last week, I introduced a text. I introduced a concept of the Messianic wedding banquet and the time of the resurrection from Isaiah chapter 25, verses 1 through 9. Now, very, very quickly, let me recapitulate, all right? In Isaiah chapter 25, which is part of what is known as the Little Apocalypse, which is Isaiah 24 through 27, I think chapter 28 as well, but I won't go into that. But it's called the Little Apocalypse because New Testament writers quote from it, allude to it, echo it over and over and over again in their predictions of the time of the end, the coming of the Lord, judgment, resurrection, etc., etc. Isaiah 25 is one of Paul's chief sources for his doctrine of the resurrection in 1 Corinthians 15, 55 and 56. So in Isaiah chapter 25, what do we find? We find verses 1 to 3, the prediction of the destruction of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple. That fortified city, which is none other than Jerusalem in the context, would be utterly destroyed. Just like in Isaiah chapter 27, the fortified city should be destroyed, and the people whom the Lord had created would no longer find mercy. And the Lord would turn the altar into chalkstone. Now, some try to make that to say that the altars of the Asherah, the idols, would be destroyed. Well, you see, the issue with that is they had set up their altars in the temple at Jerusalem. So God was saying, I'm going to destroy the idolatry. I'm going to destroy these idols and their altar when I destroy the city and the temple. Okay, so Isaiah chapter 25, 1 to 3, destruction of Jerusalem, destruction of the temple. But wait, Isaiah chapter 25, and I'm skipping over a couple of verses, one or two verses here, or one verse technically, in order to save some time. But in verse 6, in that day, what's the antecedent to in that day? It's the time of the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. In that day, the Lord shall make a great feast on this mountain. What is that mountain that he's talking about? It's Zion. And folks, I've said this before. If any one word encapsulates, summarizes biblical eschatology, it's Zion. Zion was Jerusalem. In the Tanakh, the Old Testament, every single constituent element of salvation is linked with Zion. Folks, this is incredible. I'm talking about the establishment of the kingdom. I'm talking about salvation. I'm talking about resurrection. I'm talking about the judgment. I'm talking about the coming of the Lord, the new creation. Every single constituent element of biblical eschatology is tied to Zion, but not physical Zion. No, heavenly Zion. Hebrews chapter 12, 21 and following. I'm not going to take the time to go over there and develop that. I hope this has piqued your curiosity. And if you want to see more on this, get a copy of my book. These are the days when all things must be fulfilled, because I discuss the fact that I've just shared with you. Now, let me hurry on. So, verse 6, in that day, the Lord shall create a great feast on this mountain, a feast of fine wines, a feast of wine on the lees, a feast of fat things, and feast of marrow. And he, verse 8 now, I'm sorry, back in verse 6, he shall destroy the covering that is cast over all of the nations. What covering is that? What veil is that? That's the veil of death. Virtually all scholars agree with that. So here is what is known as the great messianic wedding banquet. In the day when God would remove the veil, the curse. That's the Adamic curse, which was assimilated into the law of Moses and emphasized, magnified because of sin, which itself was magnified. The law entered that sin might abound. Romans 5, verse 21. So, now here's the great promise that on Zion, the Lord would make a great feast and remove the veil. This is resurrection. And at the time of the Messianic banquet. Now, verse 8, what did the Lord say? And at that time, the Lord shall wipe away all tears. The Lord will destroy death. So what do we have? Verses 1 through 4, 1 through 5. Destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. Verse 6, Messianic wedding banquet and resurrection. Verse 8, resurrection. The Lord shall destroy death. He shall swallow up death in victory. Verse 9, this would be the time of the salvation of Israel. At that time, it shall be said, this is our God. We have waited for him. This is our God. He will save us. So, in the context of the destruction of Jerusalem, we have the promise of the Messianic wedding banquet, which is the restoration of Israel. And the restoration, by the way, of Israel is nothing other than resurrection from the old covenant form of Israel to the new covenant form. And that would be the day, once again, of resurrection and Israel's salvation. Now then, I had to do this. I had to take the time to do this to bring this fresh to our memory. And we go to Matthew chapter 8. In Matthew chapter 8, Jesus has just given the Sermon on the Mount. He comes down from the mountain, and a leper approaches him. This is incredible. It's so touching, it's moving, it's wonderful. It is so poignant. This leper approaches Jesus. By the way, lepers were not supposed to approach anyone, they were unclean. If they were viewed as approaching anyone, they could literally be stoned to death. This man took his own life in his hands by approaching Jesus. And he said, Master, if you will, cleanse me. And Jesus said, absolutely incredible, I will, reached out and touched that leper and said, be healed, be cleansed. And he was cleansed immediately. And then, oh, this is so incredible. I don't know if you've ever noticed this or not. This has perplexed scholars down through the years. Here's the man who's just been instantly cleansed of leprosy. Can you imagine? And Jesus says to him, see that you do not tell anyone. Say what? Are you kidding me? You've just been cured of an incurable disease? Look, folks, I've seen graphic pictures of people with leprosy with their faces half eaten off, hands missing, horrible, horrible lesions all over their body, literally being consumed by this disease. And in the first century, there was absolutely no cure for it. Lepers generally had to dwell in the wilderness. They had to hide in the caves from the public. They had to rely on the public somebody to toss them a scrap of bread, something. It was absolutely horrific. So here's this man, instantly cured of leprosy. And yet Jesus says, don't tell anybody. Don't you think that if the man was married and he went back home and he walks in and his wife looks at him and is like, what? What a reunion. Okay, I got to go on. I'm sorry. But I can't help but things like that because it's so astoundingly wonderful. Okay, so then following that, a centurion, a Roman centurion, a pagan man, approaches Jesus and says, Master, my servant is lying at home, suffering horribly. It's kind of interesting. The New American Standard simply says, Sir, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, suffering great pain. Well, that doesn't really convey the power of the original Greek of how horribly this servant was suffering. And here is a Roman centurion, and you'll forgive me for taking just a moment here, but this drives the point home. Romans had more slaves than anybody ever. Slaves had no social rights. They had no human rights. A master, a slave owner, could literally hire someone to kill the slave and burn the body with no legal repercussions whatsoever. Now, Jews couldn't do that because the Torah forbade that kind of activity. But under Roman law, a Roman slave master could do that. It's unbelievable. But here is a Roman master, a Roman centurion, very powerful man, who owns a slave that he actually has a love for. This is remarkable. And he is concerned because He's paralyzed, but he probably has convulsions. And the man says, Master, come and heal him. Or he says, just speak the word. And Jesus says, I will come and heal him. And this man responds, what faith? No, Master, no. You don't have to come. Just speak the word only and he'll be healed. He said, look, I'm a man with authority. I tell someone to go and they go. I tell someone to come and they come. So you don't have to come to my house. And look, for a Jew to go to the house of a pagan was just virtually unheard of. But here is this pagan centurion inviting Jesus to come, or Jesus volunteering to come. And a man says, you don't have to do that. You don't have to violate the social norms. Just speak the word, and my servant will be healed. And Jesus marveled, the text says. And he says, I have not found such a great faith in all of Israel. Now, by the way, some people try to say, well, the centurion would have been an Israelite. Well, then why did Jesus say, I've not found such great faith in Israel? No, the man was not an Israelite, or Jesus couldn't say, I've not found such great faith in Israel. He should have said, this is the greatest faith I've ever found of anyone in Israel. But he didn't say that, did he? Good grief, I'm out of time almost. But notice this. Jesus said, many shall come from the east and from the west and shall sit down with Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom. And the sons of the kingdom shall be cast out. Folks, this is the unseen resurrection of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I will prove it next week.